Have you ever hesitated to answer a question only to have someone else beat you to the punch?
Are you better at sticking up for others than you are for yourself?
When you get feedback, do you only focus on the criticism?
Well, we have, and we know we're not alone. Everybody, both men and women, have times when negative thoughts get in their way and hold them back. And this can be particularly challenging for women in the workplace. So we're here today to talk to you about how to shift your view and break down those barriers. But first, let us tell you a little bit about our stories and how we got here. We were successful businesswomen in corporate America and full-time working moms. Hi, I'm Diane Sawyer. I worked for United Airlines for 33 years, and I still remember the first day I started. I was so excited. It was my dream job. Then I realized I was the only woman in a group of 50 people. Well, thanks to that team, and fortunately for me, I was able to overcome my initial apprehensions and had the opportunity to go on to do everything from heading a corporate learning organization to proudly leading 20,000 flight attendants through 9/11 to directing the strategic planning process for the onboard experience.
And I'm Marcia Perkins. I spent 23 years in the corporate finance world, so working with private equity groups, management teams, investment banks. In my most recent role, I was one of 3 co-founders hired by Merrill Lynch to start up a new leverage lending unit. We grew assets from 0 to over $17 billion in 6 years and became a market leader. And with that growth rate, we were always hiring new people. When we interviewed young women, they frequently told us how encouraged they were to see that we had so many women in senior roles, more than they saw at the other firms in our industry. And when I heard this, I always felt very proud of the culture we had built. But let me put what these young women were seeing in perspective. When you looked at our senior leadership team, all the managing directors and directors, 13% were women, and we stood out as progressive. Unfortunately, there are many industries that still look like this today.
So, like the women before us, we thought we were trailblazers, that our struggles and our success had paved a path for other women. And while the working environment for women today is better, it hasn't changed enough. There's still more that needs to be done.
The reality is that corporate America as we know it today was built back in the 40s and 50s when women were still at home. So it's an environment that was built by men for men, and it's natural that men feel comfortable there. Today, many women are still trying to carve out a spot that works for them. We want the paths to be easier for our daughters and for all young women, whether you choose to be a CEO or an artist, a stay-at-home mom, or an entrepreneur. Diane and I have years of experience to draw from to work on this, but we also wanted to hear what other people had to say. So we did some research. We went out and interviewed over 175 women and men to gather their wisdom and hear their stories. In these interviews, we expected to and did hear about the well-known barriers that women face at work: income inequality, glass ceilings, conscious and unconscious bias, and the old boys club. What surprised us was how much we heard about the internal struggles that get in the way. Those questions we started with are real-life examples. It quickly became obvious to us how much these limiting thoughts can get in our way and hold us back. The external environment continues to evolve and progress, but no matter how much change we see in the outside world, it won't matter if we're not ready inside. And we want you to be ready to take full advantage of all available opportunities. So let's talk about how we can break through our internal barriers.
So we went back because we were curious, what was it that some women were doing that allowed them to overcome those hurdles? And what we found, they were using a powerful tool, reframing. This is choosing to view something through a different lens. How you view life impacts how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. We see it every day, people choosing either a positive or a negative view. And most importantly, is that what we found is that when women were able to take those obstacles and view them more constructively and positively, it changed everything. So think about it. This is how it works. It's taking those negative thoughts that get in your way and hold you back and turning them into positive thoughts that move you forward. Some women were very deliberate about doing this, while others didn't even realize it. But the key is, if you can reframe consciously and with intention, it allows you to access that tool whenever you need it. So here's how it works. Reflect, reframe, react differently.
Step 1, reflect. This is the time to think about you. Be self-aware, be honest. What are the thoughts that are holding you back? What is it that you want to do differently? Do you feel like you keep making the same mistake? This is intensely personal, but that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. Ask someone you trust for their observations. Others often see things in us that we can't see ourselves. The key is to recognize the limiting thoughts. Let's run through 3 obstacles that we heard a lot about in our interviews to get you thinking about this. See if you can relate to any of these.
Guilt. This is a big one. It's driven by what you think you should do based on society, your parents, your friends, your spouses. And working moms have a lot of this. But college students, you may relate to this also. If you've ever had to choose between the path that your parents wanted for you and the one that you wanted for yourself, the result? You constantly feel like you're failing at something. And that creates a lot of wasted time and energy.
And then there's the imposter syndrome. Many of the high achievers that we talk to deal with this, including a lot of men. This is where you live in fear that people will discover you're not as talented as they think you are. You feel inadequate despite a strong track record. And when things go well, rather than owning your success, you often say, oh, I was just lucky, right place, right time. I definitely dealt with this one in my career. I remember years ago, one of my first big promotions. And after that initial excitement started to subside, the doubts crept in. I started telling myself, I don't belong here. What were they thinking putting me in this spot? I'm not that good. They're going to figure it out sooner or later. And even after I buckled down and succeeded in that position, I still had days when I doubted myself.
And my personal favorite, perfectionism. This is when you refuse to accept any standard less than perfect. Now we know women can be tough on themselves, and we understand why. We feel like we have to work twice as hard and be twice as good as men to be taken seriously. And a Harvard study shows the impact of this. They looked at a group of students majoring in economics, and what they found is that women were twice as likely as men to drop out of the major if they got a B versus an A in the introductory course. So what does that mean? That means that equally talented women were opting out while men were moving on to lucrative careers. Now we know that perfectionism can create a good work product, but it can also create lots of unneeded work. And those grades, ladies, don't forget. We don't want to limit our options.
Once you identify the thoughts that are holding you back, it's time for the second step, reframe. Take the situation and find the more productive, constructive way to look at it. Sometimes it helps to think about what advice you'd give a friend facing this situation. This isn't about taking an unrealistic perspective or using the tool to let ourselves off the hook or rationalize unhealthy behavior. It's about neutralizing those limiting thoughts and embracing positive ones that will allow us to get out of our own way and move ahead.
So for example, this is how it works. We know that women struggle with asking for a raise or a promotion. One woman put it for us and reframed it very easily for us. She said, asking for money, that's easy for me. That's milk in my kid's glass. That's the money I need for the freedom I want.
And many young women have asked us, where do guys get all their confidence? One young attorney we talked to, she was just a couple years out of school, she told us, when I'm sitting in a room with my male peers, I feel much less certain than they look. And this psyched her out at times. The reframe for her was when she realized men have their own insecurities. But from a very young age, they're taught to hide them, to appear strong. She told us, they're using a game face, and I can too.
And finally, one woman who was struggling with taking compliments and credit for her work said, and she had to reframe it like this: if I don't accept that compliment and I don't take that credit, I'm not being a good role model for other women.
These are examples of women reframing for themselves. We can also help each other with this. If you're looking for that positive view, ask someone for their ideas. People love to help. And if you see someone whose thoughts are holding them back, reframe for them.
So this happened to me early in my career. I made a mistake. And I got to be honest with you, right here standing today, I don't even remember what the mistake was. But at the time, I remember it feeling really big and really devastating. So fortunately for me, I had a coworker who came up to me and said, Diane, don't worry about this. It's going to be okay. This too shall pass. Tomorrow, everybody else is going to be worried all about the next crisis that's happening. And you're the only one that's going to be still holding on to this. So let it go. And I did, and it worked, and I still use that advice today.
Once you reframe your thinking, you've got to do something with it if you want to see some change. It's time for action, which is the third step. React differently.
So this is where the real change takes place. This is when you can truly empower yourself to move forward. So let's pull this all together. What we want to do is share with you some real-life success stories.
Jennifer graduated way back in the 80s, and she got a job at a traditional bank. She shared with us how intimidating it was to step into those rooms full of middle-aged white men and try to speak up. I was the youngest person there, I was a woman, I was a single mother, and I was black. Talk about feeling invisible, she told us. Well, how did she reframe this? Before she'd walk into that conference room, she would take a deep breath and tell herself, I want my daughter to see me as a woman of strength. This gave her the courage to speak up and be visible. Today, Jennifer's an accomplished businesswoman, and her daughter is also a woman of strength.
And then there was Karen. Karen saw a job that she was interested in, but she didn't go for it because she thought she wasn't qualified. So Karen came to us to say, how can I get that missing experience that I need? And as we were talking to her, what we found was she was only missing one non-critical piece. Unfortunately, this is all too common. Hewlett-Packard found that women would not apply for a position unless they felt they were 100% qualified, while men, they would apply if they thought they were 60% qualified. So Karen had to reframe. And what she said to herself was, you know what, I am a good fit for this job, and I can get that missing experience on the job. So she went for it. She got the job, and we're happy to tell you today she's very successful in this position.
And me with the imposter syndrome. If I could go back in time, I would assure myself that I had earned those positions fair and square, just like everyone else. That I always delivered and that the people hiring me knew what they were doing. I'd accept that it's healthy to feel nervous about a big challenge, and everyone's got a learning curve when they take on a new role. Well, I can't change my past, but I can use what I've learned today. When Diane and I were getting ready to lead our first workshop, the little voice in my head kicked in. Marcia, who do you think you are standing up in front of other people telling them what to do? You've made so many mistakes in your own life. Why should anyone listen to you? I had to reframe my own thinking. I reminded myself of all the research and the work we'd done that we were really ready. And then I shifted my focus from me in some spotlight to me in the role of helping other women and just sharing everything that we had learned. And it worked. I was able to get out of my own way.
And finally, let's get back to that perfectionism thing. I have to tell you, putting this presentation together for me has been enlightening. After all the conversations about internal struggles and reframing, I'd still trap myself. There was a time in the process where, believe it or not, we actually started overcomplicating this topic. I know it's hard to believe. We actually analyzed every word to make sure it was perfect. We even just started spinning our wheels. So now it was my time to rethink. And what I had to say to myself was, I'm good at this. I can do this. But most importantly, this topic is important for both men and women. So my reframe, it's more important to get this message out than it is to deliver it perfectly. So I stand before you today telling you about a tool that I absolutely believe can help you achieve your potential.
So back to where we started. As the world continues to open up with more options and opportunities for women, we want you to be ready. What does reframing mean for you? It means you have a choice. You can look at situations from a negative standpoint and hold yourself back. Or you can reframe your thinking, break through those barriers, and forge ahead.
We want you to use this powerful tool, reframing. We believe it can change your life. And we can tell you that it has changed ours. So now it's your turn. Get out there and take on the world, or at the very least, your next meeting. Thank you.